It is a fine grey autumnal day in beautiful London, and I am wandering through Regent's Park as the leaves fall and families play, and there is a faint clip-clop of shoes that somehow sound more expensive than mine. I'll mingle in and follow this current of fancy cardies as through a shrub I glimpse a massive white tent. Of course, it's the biggest and most prestigious art fair in the country. Now, here is where the audience split. You might be someone who loves art but hates this art world. You might see it as gross, elitist, money-soaked nonsense. You cannot understand why something like a banana taped to a wall is worth more than a mansion, and you might feel the whole system spits in the face of artists who you love or you believe in and look at fairs like this with contempt. Well, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. Well, not exactly, but those who searched for Frieze Art Fair and have stumbled across this video, welcome by the way, you already have some sympathy with this world, so stay while I try, perhaps in vain, to shift the mindset of this first group. But you might want to check out another review, because I'm actually not going to talk about art at all. I did not pay an extortionate amount for a ticket to come and view art. Don't be absurd. Because this is not a fair about art. This is a fair about selling art. So I'm going to take you on this experience through this fair, and in doing so, there's three big ideas I want to unpack: money, art, and society, to witness the art world. Let me explain. You might love motor racing, but you recognise that when you watch the Monaco Grand Prix, the billionaires who park their yachts along the track are not doing so for the best view of a tight corner. Monaco is a spectacle. It is the Paris Fashion Week of F1, both of which it's more important what happens around the track and the runway for those seeking influence than it does what happens on them. It is a bizarre circus that has almost nothing to do with the clothes or the cars or here, the art. And as we enter this, if you do like some of the art, just pop the time code in the comments and I or someone else will get back to you with who made it. But first, let's address the elephant in the room: money. Because if you do not understand the economics of this industry, you will never have any sympathy for what you are seeing here. After that, I will talk briefly about the art, and don't worry, it will only be brief. To be clear, whether or not I liked or disliked a particular work won't be featured. I will talk about what it feels like to connect and confront art in this environment and why I can't be objective, and that is the whole beautiful point. And finally, I will come on to the reason I came to explore what fairs like Frieze say about society and the world we are living in. Because if you do really want to take the pulse of society, there is no greater place where you can have artworks made by broke artists being strolled past by high-flying billionaire aristocrats. Places like this are the cleanest mirror, and that is why I think it's like the greatest performance art piece of the year. For context, who am I? Well, I'm a nobody. I make paintings in a shed, I live in a mobile home, and I make videos on the most base platform for opinions available. Meanwhile, here, I'm surrounded by the wealthiest people in the art ecosystem. This world do not care for YouTube, and YouTube does not care for them. This tension is exactly what I want to explore in this video. It's quite fun. So let's begin. Money shapes everything in this art world, yet most people focus on the extremes. At one end, you have artists who are struggling to make ends meet and basically cannot even afford their rent. I would fall more in that category. But at the other end, you have this absurd auction prices and buyers spending the kind of money that feels disconnected from reality. People see these two polarities and then project their disgust, confusion, or resentment onto events like this one. But that misses the actual machinery in the middle, what this fair focuses on, because this is a fair of that machinery. Back to the F1 analogy, it's the kind of fair for the engineers of the cars, working hard to appeal to investors and support the drivers. The engineers here are galleries. Galleries often get a terrible reputation. Among amateur artists, they are often called exploiters, middlemen who take over half an artist's income. But this is a shallow and often ignorant view because yes, a gallery often takes 50% or more of a sale. Yet the artists who I know who have representation and a gallery backing them are happier and always better off than the artists trying to sell alone. The problem that most artists face is not making work, it's selling it. Selling art is an entirely different skill to making art. This fair is not about how art was made. This is a fair about how art is sold. You have to accept that distinction or you will never make sense of what you are seeing here. Galleries have to pay huge fees to have a booth at Frieze. They take massive financial risks and they bring their selected artists into this environment. They do not do that because they hate artists. They do it because their entire purpose is to sell enough art that that artist can sustain a career. They are invested in them. A gallery's reputation matters more to a buyer than an individual artist's voice. And that might seem hard to understand, but when a respected gallery backs you, your prices rise not because your art becomes better, but because buyers trust in that gallery's judgment. And that gallery has to earn that reputation. Most people who set up a gallery love art and they want to support artists, and they are having a terrible time at the moment and going out of business all over the place. Now, just to break this right down, it's quite common for someone who makes art, like me, who has no representation and who didn't go to art school, to sell an artwork for a maximum of about $3,000. At the top end, that's what people will comfortably buy from an artist who has no name or no representation because they simply love that artwork that was made. Now, if that artist had a history of really investing in their artwork and aimed for a full-time career, they may choose to represent them. That £3,000 painting might then become £6,000. You may also have an agent who takes another percentage, and this is seen as ridiculous. But what happens now is actually a mutually beneficial relationship. The gallery is not an expert in making art, obviously. The gallery is an expert in selling art. And that is what every artist really needs. The gallery is the one who has the connections. The gallery builds the reputation of helping artists to have good careers. Other artists see this and they want in. And also, buyers will then notice that every new artist that a gallery takes on seems to do better and better, and their artworks become more and more valuable. So, when that gallery then chooses to take on another new artist, instantly, just by the reputation of the gallery alone, that artist is worth more. Yes, nepotism exists. Yes, often these young artists have played the system correctly. They've gone to a good art school, they've worked hard, and they know the right people. The top of the top is a bit of a closed loop, but it is in every art form and nearly every industry. Here, it is also incredibly fickle, as the value of art to us all is purely subjective. There is no objective value. So, in monetary terms, value has to be defined in a different way, and it is defined by representation and by reputation. If this kind of valuation annoys you, then just remember what Jerry Saltz said, that if you hate the art world as an outsider artist, then rest assured, the art world insiders hate the system too. But this relationship does make art expensive. And people say they want to support artists, yet complain that original works are expensive. Paintings are expensive because surviving as an artist is expensive, and I should know. Think of it this way. You might be an artist working full-time to produce works and sell a £100 artwork every working day of the week. Before any expenses, you're still only going to be making minimum wage in this country, Or you might sell one of those £3,000 artworks 8 times a year. It's the same compensation as stacking shelves in a supermarket. So what often happens is artists go one of two ways. They stay more in the craft world, where they sell courses and skills or opinions to hobbying and amateur artists who want to improve. Or they try and get in with a gallery. Then you, as an appreciator of that art, could always buy a print. You can go to artists' shows and enjoy them in real life, which is what I would recommend everybody do. Even if you can't afford an artist who gets successful, the whole system of galleries is needed. If you love art, hopefully you do go to openings and galleries and support the artists that they put on. Because while you may not be able to afford it, that day out at that opening and the people that you bring there, to me, is just the greatest thing ever. And the galleries are getting a really bad rap. They shouldn't. Some of the art on show in Frieze Art Fair here is going for 100 grand at the lower end. Now, while that may seem extortionate, remember, this is the creme de la creme of the art world. These artists shown here by their galleries are their best artists. Think about how every publishing house takes on authors all the time, or every movie studio that invests in a film, or every record label that takes on a new musician. The way those economies work is normally for every 10 artists they take on, they'll be really lucky if one blows up. And the success of that one will subsidize the other 9 and hopefully make that publishing house a bit of profit. The same is the case here. So while many of you think this is a lot of money, these are the best artists that the best galleries can throw at us. And after the galleries take their cut and the agents theirs, they might still be bringing home not that much money if they're only making a few of these works a year. You might consider the size of their studio they have to pay for, the production of their pictures, the cost of the materials. It's not quite as gross as it seems at first hand. Plus, remember, we are in the equivalent of Monaco here. The reason it might seem so gross is that we can buy a ticket and walk shoulder to shoulder amongst those who are buying it. You don't get to do that in a fancy restaurant and see the tens of thousands thrown down on a lunch bill every day by the same people. And there are many ways for people like you and me to view and buy art. There are many other gallery models. Hypha Studios take abandoned shops and set up shows around the whole country, and they are growing massively. Hypha Studios is a fantastic model, and there are many others that I could name. But people who are going into setting up these galleries are mainly doing it because they love artists and they love art. You are more than welcome to hate the art, to feel very uncomfortable about the art that's worth millions, and that the people who buy it or invest in it, whether you think they're money laundering or that they're just locking it away as a financial asset and for no other reason. But please, don't place your hatred at the door of the galleries. You can criticize the system, and many do, but you cannot pretend it doesn't exist. And if you want artists to survive, some version of this system has to exist. You can buy affordable art elsewhere. You can support grassroots galleries. You can go to openings. You can share artists' work, but you cannot expect the top end of the art world to operate anything like a charity. It is a market. And we are in Davos, the World Economic Forum of Art. If you expect all the meetings happening there to actually be about making the world a better place, you are equally deluded. You do not have to like it, but that is the way money is done here. Right, thank God that's out of the way. So that brings me to the art itself, believe it or not, because despite everything I've said, I still walked around this fair with joy, and the art deserves to be addressed on its own terms. So let's shift our focus. If you want to view art, there are many free exhibitions and galleries around London. Here is basically 300 exhibitions in one. You could run full speed around the whole thing for an hour and you won't have seen everything. If you've come to truly engage with the range of art on display, you would leave as a puddle Now, I'm not going to review or rank the artworks or tell you which pieces I loved or which I hated. That's not the point. The reason I love art is that it's the one last place in life where meaning is not objective. There is no test, no grade, no universal metric of value. You either feel something or you don't. And your response is real, even if no one else shares it. But we must clarify, this is an art world fair, not an art fair. So there is some way that these galleries determine what is and isn't good art. Because there is an element where those really knowledgeable and in the know can see where artists have developed on or previously tried to move something beyond what someone else has tried to do, push it into a unique place in a unique way. Often, if you were to go into any art school, not being that familiar with art, you might see people do things that you find quite challenging, maybe stuff with menstrual blood or violence. And while in your unique experience, you might see those things as quite impactful and weird or even profound and provocative, people in the art world will know that they've been done 1,000 times before. They know what looks like what's been said and what hasn't, much more than you. And while that in itself is quite interesting, it does lead to something else happening, where people aren't really that willing currently to develop on the canon of other artists' work, or rather galleries aren't that willing to invest in artists who are doing so, because they fear being called derived. But in not doing so, there is a slight flatness in everything currently that I feel walking around here. It all feels a little bit too detached from any kind of culture that this country has produced before and trying to stand aside so unique. And I've heard other criticisms of this fair in a similar way, but I also have my own biases and my subjectivity. I'm a painter, I love paintings, and I'm reassured somewhere like this in how many paintings there are, but I also recognise that the market is playing it slightly safe, and that the crazy conceptual pieces that many of these galleries are investing on are not necessarily going to show here because they're less likely to sell in this moment. So I will leave it up to you to decide what you like here and what you don't. But I will clarify that I get very annoyed when I see on social media people criticize conceptual pieces or larger pieces on a 4-inch phone screen. You must understand that you are watching this on a screen. You are not here. And while I framed this to be about the size of a TV, this artwork here, it's not going to look anything like it does in reality when you come to see it in person. The impact of witnessing such art in person is what it's all about. For it tells you so much more in helping you understand yourself, in what you like and what you don't, and navigating others as you try to find meaning in what is meaningless. And I mean that in a really positive way. I'll explain. Some people find meaning through religion. Some people find meaning through family. Some people find meaning through other things. But most people have no real idea why we're here, how we got here, or what we're supposed to do while we're here. There is no objective truth. The real joy of looking at art for me, either on my own or with somebody else, is that you reveal yourself. When you walk through a gallery with a friend or a partner or a stranger and you talk honestly about what you feel, you learn who they are and you learn who you are. You just have to get over the shame of knowing that there is no right or wrong opinion because they feel stupid, like they just don't get it. Well, the world has no inherent meaning. We invent it. Art is one of the few socially acceptable spaces where you are allowed to search for meaning without being handed an answer. And that's why I love it. That's why I love making it and why I love talking about it and enjoying it with other people. It's about connecting either with myself or others, and hopefully you find value in a video like this of me trying to explain all this, but recognize that if you and I were to come together to this, we would get to know each other so much better. If you feel lonely, throughout history there are many people, alive now or dead, who felt the same way and have bottled their anxieties and their passions in art. There is a comfort in the meaninglessness of all this and trying to find what touches you, Places like this are a sandbox to remind you of how to be in the outside world. And then you can take that energy out for a walk in the woods, or just standing in the metro or the subway, or sitting in a cafe and find the same joy elsewhere because you learned to look and let it be unique to you here. This is the training ground. Anyway, I'm going off on a massive tangent, but that's why I like art. But I can't tell you what's good and what's not. But I'd love to join you and walk around here and explore what we both hate and what we both like together. Maybe don't do that here because, like I said, this isn't about art. This is the art world. This fair shows me, I believe, exactly where society is, what it's confused by, what it pretends to care about, what it ignores, what it celebrates, and what it fears. This kind of fair lets me take a pulse on the world. If we expand upwards and outwards to the umbrella of how the art world is considered at the moment, a lot of things are under a bit of scrutiny for being too focused on identity or not focused enough. And that, in this country at least, is a hot topic. It has been for a few years, and recently there's a bit more criticism of it. And there are really interesting other conflicts around this that to me are so obvious, so glaring a mirror on wider society, that I'm so glad I came here to be able to see it so polished. And that is, and bear with me here, as I walk around, I already know the immutable characteristics of the artists who made certain works of art. For example, any female nude I see, I can almost guarantee will be done by a woman. I also know that in the promotion of such things, Frieze was keen to show artists, not because of the diversity of the range of their work, but in the diversity of how they presented in the world. Now, while people may say this is a great thing, correcting the frame that has previously been dominated by people who are all too similar, others may say that gender or how someone looks or the kind of people they choose to have sex with is the most boring thing about them. That such things should not be qualifiers on whether or not they can or cannot make good art. Whatever you think, what I find interesting is the moral stance that these kind of fairs make regarding showing how much they support this idea. Because the brutal reality is that these markets are about selling and money, and they move where the money is. Currently, there is a lot of money in Saudi Arabia, and many art fairs like Frieze and Basel are setting up fairs in those areas. Now, whether you agree or not with the morality of stances around diversity and inclusion on display here, there is an uncomfortable truth that they are moving into parts of the world where the very values that they say they celebrate in the artists here are not going to be celebrated there. And many of the identities are going to be directly criticised or criminalised. It's a contradiction so glaring that frankly I find it hilarious. Think about the Sensations exhibition in 1997. It was bold, it was risky, it was alive, it sparked national arguments. The energy of it helped give birth to new generations of artists and eventually, just a couple of years later, to fairs like this one. It was not timid, it was not careful, it was loud. The conversations were all about the works on the walls. But what's interesting here, and what I noticed walking around Frieze and listening, all of the conversations were around AI. Not one or two, but dozens. People were debating tools, disruption, fear, yet none of the art on display here reflects it. It felt like a total disconnect. We are on the edge of a technological shift that will define a generation, and almost none of the work in this fair is engaging with it. And yes, this world is slightly different to that world, but even at the start of the digital revolution and the internet, there were many artworks and artists that were challenging and exploring what was happening. Many of them didn't last, but it was a very interesting focal point. And it feels to me now, with all of the conversations around this, that this year's fair is just going to vanish in the arc of history because we're on the precipice of AI changing so much in our lives. And I'm very interested to know how it's going to change this world, as I don't think it's quite woken up to it. The artists here or the galleries don't quite yet know how to handle it. And I think artists, in the most pure sense of the word, are going to be the final frontier of resistance to AI, because this is all about what humans make and the celebration of what humans make, I just worry, with so few signs of defense, that the battle here is not even going to be interesting. That the spokespeople who criticize Europe and China might just be right, that we're going to scream about what should and shouldn't be as we sink. But this is why fairs like this are fascinating. You can sense all of this tension. You can see the wealth, the theatre, the self-importance, the insecurity, the morality, the contradictions, the avoidance, the past like clinging to relevance, and the future arriving whether anybody's ready or not. And you see the world in miniature. And when I walked out of the tent and back into London, I felt more connected to what is happening in the world, not less, because inside this fair is the extreme end of a system that the rest of us feel in smaller ways. Lots of questions being highlighted and stitched together in bold about meaning or value, questions about identity, questions about technology and the future. And I had a great day. I loved the spectacle. I loved watching the dynamics. You do not have to approve of it all to learn from it. You do not have to like the art to enjoy the experience. You can walk through Frieze and share the same air as people whose lives are nothing like yours. And yes, London Zoo costs a lot less, but the animals in this tent are far more fascinating. I want to thank the patrons of Art Loud, specifically Clementine and Keelan on the co-production tiers. If you want to support these videos, please do swing over there. There's early release videos and Patreon-only exclusives, and it really helps me to make more videos like this. I'm really interested to know what you think. Thanks very much. See you in the next one.